Good evening, everyone. This is Skinny E Media, bringing to you one of the greatest interviews I could probably ever have. Well, only time will tell. And here we have right here is Mr. Arthur de Jong, who is a famous Dutch filmmaker who done Drop Dead Fred, one of my all-time favorite films with Phoebe Cates and Rik Mayall. It was critically panned upon initial release, but it certainly managed to find itself a cult following, even after Mr. Mayall's untimely death. So, thank you for stopping on by, Mr. De Jong. How do you do yourself?
It's very nice, Mark. As I said to you before we talked, I'm vain enough to like it, that you and many other people like the film so much. You know, it's a sort of like a gift. It is just really a gift that a film has not disappeared. I make films, and usually, if they're good or not good, they disappear. Drop Dead Fred is one of those unique films that stays. People are forgetting it, which is fantastic. So it's an enormous pleasure to talk about it and to feel that the film still has value.
Well, I'm glad to hear that there, because many people will agree with you the same sort of way. I know one of my best friends, he doesn't like it that much, but I certainly connected with it when I saw it first at around 11, and this was when I was in England. They aired it like on ITV or Channel 4, sometime around 8 or 9, and I was mesmerized, well, not only by Miss Cates' beauty, because I had a crush on her back then, but also Rik Mayall, because I saw him a little bit on Bottom and New Statesman, Guest House Paradiso. He was definitely a spook to be bewildered with.
Yeah.
So yes, so I'll get to a series of questions there and see if you're interested. Now, with the legacy of the film itself, has it become a popular one more or less because of films like Fight Club, Looking for Eric, Daniel Isn't Real, and even Jojo Rabbit, which depict imaginary friends or some form of mental disorder? I don't know if it. What I'm trying to say is, it's become popular because of those films.
Yeah, I have to admit, Mark, that when we made the film, which of course is like more than 30 years ago, we didn't think so much about it. There were other films that had an imaginary friend. For instance, Harvey. Harvey was a classic Hollywood film where there was an imaginary friend, which was a big rabbit. And things like the Fight Club, in all fairness, I don't think they were inspired by Drop Dead Fred. Though I did hear that Jojo Rabbit, that the director of Jojo Rabbit loved Drop Dead Fred. So he might have been inspired by it. But, you know, the reality is like everything inspires you. You know, the grocery man at the corner and the gas station. You can be inspired by so many things. The whole life around you inspires you. When I read it, I had not done something with an imaginary friend before, but I had done films where the memories and the flashbacks were extremely important and shed another light on somebody's life in the present. So that wasn't a big leap to go to an imaginary friend then.
That's what I was sensing there. He probably was influenced by a lot of influences, not only from other films, but also personal experiences. And I think that human touch to it is definitely one of the stronger aspects of DDF. That, upon initial list, I could see why some people were like, what is this? What is going on? But it's certainly connected years over the years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will say, because I've seen the films that I mentioned in question, I would say Jojo Rabbit has the most in common, because there's that sort of childlike wonder, even amidst the sort of dark and disturbing narrative that's going behind it about the Holocaust and the Second World War.
Yeah.
So yes, probably less a little sort of Fight Club, because that was about a man who thinks, there's a split sort of personality. So I get what you mean there.
I wonder if Jojo Rabbit had been possible, like in the time we made Drop Dead Fred. I mean, Drop Dead Fred was barely possible because we got a lot of criticism that Fred, Rik, was was basically putting young people on the bad track, because he was snot flicking, he was spitting, he was swearing. and a lot of people thought that was inappropriate for children. I think that Jojo Rabbit, with its making fun of fascism, I think that could have been done 30 years ago. That people would have been very offended by that. So whenever you try to make comedy about a serious subject, generally you have an uphill battle. And Drop That Fret never presented itself as a serious film, but in the end it had a very deep underlying from basically mental disorder. But we never talked about it. It's never said in the film. It's never indicated, but it's there. And I truly think it's one of the reasons why the film still holds, because there's a layer under there that people intuitively recognize, and at the same time they can laugh about it. Because it's what I say these days, or for quite some time. Like, if you have problems and you can laugh about them, it's not problem. You can't laugh about your problems; they don't exist.
I would agree with that mode of thought there. Sometimes difficult subject matter can sometimes lend itself to unintentional humor in the best of circumstances. I mean, many of the great films that have come out in recent years, particularly even on the side note, Four Lions. Chris Morris, he's a big idol of mine as well. That was about terrorism and jihad, but they somehow managed to make it satirical.
Yes.
Or a Todd Solondz type of film like Happiness or Welcome to the Dollhouse. Those are some really, sort of. They have a different rating system there, so I'm thinking of like X, type of subject matter. But they somehow managed to make it in a way that's cringeworthy, but funny at the same time. So I think that's the charm of it all. I know you were saying about Fred being a bad example for children, which gets into the next sort of question about the film classification issue. I know the Netherlands has a different system, 6 and 12, 16, but in the US you've got PG-13, and in Britain you have 12, which it both received. Was it a bit of an issue trying to, get it to a PG, or did you have to sacrifice and say, well, it's PG-13?
Actually, Mark, it was. I mean, it was a little bit difficult for me because I come from a culture where the ratings are almost self-imposed. You almost say yourself, well, let's make the film. I think in Holland it was 12 years or 16, and you could almost choose that yourself. And many times people said we want it to be a 16 film, otherwise the kids from 16 to 20 don't take it seriously, because if it's a year-old, they think it's childish. So actually the ratings were used in Holland and in Europe in general for almost commercial purposes. The people were definitely rated films higher because they thought their target audience would like it more. With Drop That Fret, I didn't think there was anything in there that was offensive, but as the American morals were slightly more restrictive than mine were, we had a few scenes in the film that we needed to put out on the distributor said, because he said, if you leave those in, the ratings will go up and we will lose a big chunk of the audience. The easiest example, Mark, is that a number of times he says mega bitch. And we were only allowed to say mega bitch twice, because otherwise our rating would change. So he says mega bitch twice in the film versus mega beast, because we had to change it. We basically dubbed a number of mega bitches into mega beasts. And another thing that had to go out was the rating. At a certain point, he picks his nose and he gets a bogey and he shoots it away, and it lands in the coffee cup of Marcia Mason, of the mother. And then she drinks the coffee, and that was too much. That had to go out. So you see him picking his nose, and you see her drinking the coffee, but you don't see the bogey landing in the coffee anymore.
I honestly didn't even know that. I'm certainly, the times have changed there from where you could get away with what I would say is sort of like toilet humor, which you can find in films as low as, I guess over there it'd be like R or 6.
Yeah.
Our equivalent would be U or PG.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure. Well, because it feels like a film that would probably be made. Because I know some people were kind of unsure about it because that PG-13 or 12 meant, oh, it's probably more for teenagers. I
Yeah.
think the film probably has a bit more of a sort of child adolescent appeal than people make it out to be. I know in Australia it got a PG and
Yeah.
they marked it as a family film, despite a few uses of the word shit and
Yeah.
bitch and
Yeah.
that brief moment of nudity where you see a man's ass. But you
Yeah.
couldn't see it
I
growing
mean,
up.
I agree that I don't see anything offensive in the film, but that's a little bit my background. But they thought, certainly in America, they thought it was not appropriate for kids of 5, 6 years old. Later, of course, we heard that when the video came out, that particularly the children below 10, not before 5, but let's say between 6 and 10, adored the movie because they said, Rik said all the things that they were not allowed to say. So, of course, they liked it.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that there. Which I would get to a point where, because growing up, I couldn't really watch it because for quite a long time the video cassette was a 15. This was before 12 became standardized for video classification. So for a
Yeah,
while, I was like, why can't I go see this? And this was at the same time I couldn't watch South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut when that came out. And it
yeah,
was animated, and I thought, oh, but it's got a lot of cursing and stuff. But Drop Dead Fred's certainly a lot milder than South Park. But
yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting story, a little bit right there. It's the nature of the beast. I'm sure when we were kids, we all wanted to sneak and watch.
It's a change of time, Mark. I mean, time continues, and you know, in a strange way, you would think that times develop and things get more free. That's not entirely true because I'm a child of the early 70s. I was very young, of course, and the late 60s. That period had more freedom than we have now in behavior and lifestyle. So it's not always that things become more free, but certainly society changes, and therefore certain things are more accepted or less accepted.
No, you're right there. I know. I'm sure because I wasn't born in the '80s. You had the AIDS epidemic. More people became conservative with sex.
Yeah,
Now you have issues related to terrorism and stuff. People are more sensitive about that sort of, or issues related to race and discrimination, where you can't say certain slurs out in the open. Drop Dead Fred has a sort of un-PC bent about it, but it's not malicious. It's not
yeah, yeah,
like, for instance, Song of the South or
yeah.
Birth of a Nation. We're not going to talk about that, but yeah, I will get to the next question though. About Miss Phoebe Cates. What a gorgeous woman and a talented actress too. Did
Yeah.
she join the project mainly because the producers thought, because of Gremlins and the sort of dark comedy angle, she would be more or less connected with it? I presume.
Yeah. I had seen Gremlins, of course, and Fast Time at Richmond time and all that. It's also, I mean, that certainly helped, but also she had a kind of an innocence that you would believe that she could marry a man that's slightly older and be cheated by him and think that she has to accept. So she had a naivete, or anyway, she could act that. She had a naivete that was perfect for the part. And because of course, we met like more people. We saw, for instance, Carrie Fisher. We saw Carrie also for the part of Elizabeth, so the part that Phoebe played. But it was very immediately clear that Carrie was such a independent woman. I mean, if her husband would cheat on her, she would make mincemeat out of him. You know, you would believe her. She would say, "Oh God, I don't know what to do." You just like her persona is so different that you wouldn't believe, and the persona of Phoebe is that you believe her.
I could see that. She does play a sort of, sort
Yeah,
of dull-eyed innocence, Betty Boop about her. And I think that sort of lends the sort of contrast between Rik Mayall's Fred, who's just and then
yeah,
it's sort of like, oh,
yeah,
you would never do that.
yeah, yeah,
I always like acting out on camera because it gets the message out. So yeah, that was personally, in my opinion, my favorite Phoebe Cates film. I know everyone says about Fast Times because of that the nudity. That one scene with
The famous shot is always when she comes out of the swimming pool.
You're right there, but well, I don't want to get into the little details there about what my thoughts were. I think she's beautiful in her own sort of way, mainly from her hair and her skin and her eyes, especially the eyes. They're very expressive, and I think that helps build the sort of contrast between Fred and Elizabeth's character, at least in my opinion. And I'll get also onto the next question about Rik Mayall, who's the whole star of the film. With Bottom and the young ones, he was definitely. So I'm sure that was probably the appeal to it, and also working title. In its early days, they produced this, and because that's a British company, and they probably have some connections with Channel 4 and BBC, is probably why they said, "Hey, let's get Rik Mayall out. He'd be a good lad." He's definitely that hilarious bugger that was in Bottom and the young ones.
Yeah. I had seen the young ones, of course. Well, of course, yeah, I'd seen the young ones, but Rik was attached to the project before I was. I had to be approved by Rik, because the writers had the idea. One of the writers knew Rik, or I don't know if he knew him personally or just his work, but he got in touch with Rik and said, "Listen, I have this project, Drop That Fred. He's an anarchistic kind of an imaginary friend." And Rik liked the idea, so they developed it with Rik in mind. And Rik was quite a big star at that point in the UK because of the young ones particularly. And so Rik had to approve me. I had to fly to the UK to meet with Rik. And when he liked me, that is how we continued. And people always ask if Rik, for instance, improvised a lot, but he didn't really. We talked about the scene with the writers up front, then we tried things just in the scene, but once we agreed on the scene, he didn't really improvise an enormous new amount while we were shooting. He stuck pretty much to what was in the script, only he could do that brilliantly and could do it again and again and fresh again.
Okay, I didn't even know about that, about the improvisation. It was, more or less sticking to what the script said, which I think is absolutely impressive. Because that man has a bit of a comic talent unique of his own that unfortunately cannot be compared. I know, unfortunately, he passed away a fair few years ago. May he be remembered. I know, for me, this was my favorite film of his, alongside Guest House Paradiso. I know for a lot of Americans and Canadians abroad, they don't really know Mayall that well. Because I talked to him about Bottom and Young Ones, but no one's ever heard of it. But when you say about Drop Dead Fred, they're like, "Okay, I know that movie. I saw it when I was a little kid. It was hilarious."
Yeah, the young ones I think played on MTV for some time, but that is of course a very select audience at that moment. There were a bunch of teenagers who liked music, and that's where they know Rik maybe from there. But in England he was a big star. In England he was absolutely a big star.
Oh yes, he was, especially also along with Aid Edmondson, and he's also appeared on a few adverts for like Nintendo and a council to support or not support the joining of the Euro. I think that is probably his best charm. He's definitely a sort of wild personality of his own. I prefer him over Aid, but don't tell Aid Edmondson I said that. But which also brings up to another question in regards to that comparison that probably some people have made. You've heard of The Mask, right?
Yes.
The Jim Carrey film.
Yeah.
You probably were thinking to yourself when you saw that at the film, wow, that is a lot like Dr. Fred. What is going on? He's still in his style.
See, I don't really know because I never talked to Jim Carrey. It seems that you're right. It seems to me that you're right. And there was a lot of talk after Drop That Fred to make a sequel. And Rik didn't really want to do it. He was in doubt because he didn't get good reviews and it hurt him enormously. And then they were talking about Jim Carrey doing Drop That Fred. But one of the financiers said, "Oh, Jim Carrey, he's only done Ace Ventura. he's probably a guy for one movie and not more. So they basically said Jim Carrey couldn't do it. The film never came, which was, of course, a big mistake because Jim Carrey can be brilliant. But I was surprised if he took some guidance from Drop Dead Fred, because in its exuberance, it is similar. I think Jim Carrey is phenomenal. I think he's absolutely great. I never met him, which is a pity. He became very serious later, did a lot of painting and all that. But I mean, that is so often with comedians. Like, look at Robin Williams, who was also like stunning, and then he gets these depressive moods.
No, you're right there. I remember, well, I know with Robin Williams' case, he'd done 1 Hour Photo, which I thought was one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen. It's not the most violent, it's not the most glorious film, but it's certainly a film that gets into your skin with a man who's alone, or he's creeping on people's photographs.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, Rik Mayall has done something quite to that level. Maybe plus being like New Statesman, because that's a bit more of a higher brow sort of comedy than Bottom or Young Ones. And then Jim Carrey, he done a Truman Show and Number 23 and Eternal Sunshine, which I thought were pretty good. But I personally like his more comic stuff a little bit more. But yeah, you're probably right. Because I saw Mask first before Drop Dead Fred, and you know, years later when I was revisiting Drop Dead Fred, I certainly thought the same thing. I thought, okay, he kind of took the style a little bit too close, especially with the eyes popping out and the bouncing around. And the special effects in DDF were very good. At whatever budget it was made, I'm sure you certainly managed to squeeze a lot out of it. Good job to the VFX.
I mean, it is one of those things, Mark. Like, we obviously, the film was it was an indie film and it was a low budget. It was decent for my terms. It wasn't a lot of money because, you know, I never had a budget like that. But of course, things are more expensive in America. But we barely had any budget for special effects. And for instance, like the scene in the kitchen where he sticks his head in the refrigerator, I mean, the producer said, listen, we just can't do it. And we were lucky because we were shooting in Minneapolis, and one of the crew members who came from Minneapolis said, I know a guy who wants to make makeup effects, and he's never really done it, but maybe he can do something. So he made the flat head, and he did it. He did it himself, and you know, I think he got like $200 for it or something. And the thing was, it was all glued on, so Rick couldn't turn, you know, he couldn't do anything like that. We just had to shoot him like that, but it worked. You know, and basically his neck was literally just a piece of stretch rubber that was painted by the makeup person to give it a skin tone, and somebody was holding it on the inside of the refrigerator. So it was very cheap effects, but you know, with a little bit of luck and a little bit of smart editing, you get pretty far.
Well, whatever his name is, congratulate him for that, because that was certainly impressive there. Yeah. Sometimes the best films often make it out on budgets that aren't, you know, 100 million or 75 like they are nowadays. They make the latest Marvel.
Yeah.
You get the idea there.
Yeah. No, I think we were lucky. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work as good as you hope. For instance, like the sinking of the houseboat, I don't think that's that great. That's, of course, mechanical special effects. That's something else than the makeup effects or the CGI things. But I think the sinking of the houseboat, which was a miniature, and you know, all the water falling out, I found it a bit cheap when I saw it. And that's where you really lack the money. That's where you think, oh, if that had to be, if we wanted to do that right, we have had to spend much more money and do it better. But,
yeah, I can see that in retrospective. I personally thought the houseboat sinking scene was quite impressive. Maybe that's just me, but
but that's good. Maybe I'm too tough on myself. You know, directors are never really very good critics of their own movies, because you see things that nobody else sees, and you think about things that nobody else thinks about. I, for instance, think that, you know, some of the elements in the script are a little bit stiff and could have been done better. Nobody worries about them. I'm the only one who worries about it. So you shouldn't listen to a director when they talk about their own movie.
I'm afraid I might be a little bit late on that one because I actually know someone who done a movie just lately called Censor, which is about BBFC, it's the British version of the MPAA. And I always talk to her about, oh, did this film influence you? Did that? Why did you pick this actress or that particular scene? So yeah, definitely entertaining conversations. I'll definitely give you that. But yeah, I'll take your word for it. I know another, you know, I know I shouldn't talk about this, but are you friends with Mr. Verhaven? Because I know he says when he did Hollow Man, he hated it.
We do know each other, of course. I mean, he's certainly at least one generation older than I am. He's in his early 80s, and I'm in my early 60s, or mid 60s, right? But I do know him. When I started, when I was 21, I was like 16th assistant on one of his films. And of course, you know, Holland is small, so at general gatherings, you meet each other and we talked, and I know him quite well. Yes.
All right, then. Well, if you ever do meet him again, tell him I said hi, because RoboCop is definitely one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
Alongside Drop Dead Fred, that it was made by a Dutch filmmaker. I know the industry, this kind of leads to the next question, is not really that known for its cinema, except for a few titles like Torksfreud, which is Turkish delight, that he also did, and then Zwarteberg. I don't know if I pronounced that right. It means black book.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Zwarteberg. My French is better than my Dutch. My bad. But yes, so what would you have to say in regards to Drop Dead Fred, or even any of Verhaven's films, or even your films like Love is Thicker Than Water and Het Bombardment?
Yeah.
Did it have some impact on the Dutch film industry?
Well, you know, Mark, the harsh reality is no. I mean, the Dutch film industry is completely subsidy-based. There are it is almost impossible to make a feature without a subsidy, which means that rules are so different because you get subsidy if your film has social value or political value or whatever. And of course, as a filmmaker, you can be very flexible. But the other thing, the bad thing about subsidy is if there's always just a small amount of subsidy and there's many people who get it, which means that if I get it, you won't get it. So you don't like me. If I make a success, you won't like me because if I make a success, I have more of a shot to make another film. That is the great thing about Hollywood. If I make a film that's successful, you'll get it because there's more money to make other films. So in Holland, generally, Paul left Holland, as I did, because we were successful. I made a few, at a very young age, very successful local films. That's the worst thing you can do. I mean, if you ever want to lose friends, you have to make successful films. He left, and I did more or less the same, also because I was adventurous and all that. I'm more adventurous than Paul, actually. But the Dutch film industry, now that Paul has risen to a level where he is really recognized in the world as a special filmmaker, now he gets the credit in Holland. But in the time that he made films here, he was generally not liked at all. I had looked at my first few films were very much liked. Then I became successful and I stayed successful. And then it was tough. It was tough. But then I moved to Hollywood and I did Miami Vice first. And I did an episode of Miami Vice with James Brown and Chris Rock. And people liked that because Miami Vice was a sort of cultural phenomenon. But Holland is one of the few countries that never really cared about Drop Dead Fred. You know, the film did well in Australia, in New Zealand, in America, in Canada, and all that. I mean, as an indie film, of course. But in Holland, it was released just now, like now. The film is 30 years old. I get calls from England, from the United States, from all kinds of countries saying it's so great that the film is. I've had not one call from Holland. So,
Well, it is your most known film, and it stands long to the test of time. I'm actually sorry to hear that it didn't really connect with people in Benelux, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. I know it's maybe it's maybe a cultural mistranslation there, because the humor might seem a bit too out there for its own good, but I'm sure probably it might have connected with some people in France.
yeah.
Because they tend to like sort of zany type of humor, like Astérix et Obélix, Tintin, Jacques Tati, and then in Britain we've got Mr. Bean, who's a legend, and Blackadder. So that they're definitely known for that sort of more zany screwball type of humor there.
Yeah.
I would be interested to see what a French version of Drop Dead Fred would be like, like Fred, le nouveau Pierre des Fous. That's it. I don't know. What can I say? I know what you were saying about the European film industry. You are absolutely right in that they often need subsidies from EU and various companies like FFF. I think it's like the Film Reform. This is the Fund in Germany, and then Media, which is financed by the European Union. So that's why you often see a lot of German and even Spanish and Italian productions be sort of co-productions from various countries.
Yeah.
And before Brexit, even that happened for a lot of British films as well.
Yeah.
Like Looking for Eric, which some people compare to Drop Dead Fred. That was financed by France, Germany, and Spain.
Yeah.
But it was set in the north of England. And it had Eric Cantona, who used to be, I think, like on Paris Saint-Germain back in the 90s, and Arsenal. So yeah, definitely interesting story there. So that's why I understand why a lot of European filmmakers will make their movies in English or go to the US or Canada or even France, because their market's quite strong enough. And now these days you see China as a growing force for film industry, with even people like Pierce Brosnan, James Bond, even doing movies there as well. But
I made like there was a period where we made the first co-productions, and they were called Euro Pudding, because there was like there were all these influences, and every country had to have a little bit of that. So it became nothing. I made one of those films, All Men Are Mortal, which was based on a novel of Simone de Beauvoir with Irene Jacob, who was at that time very well known because of his Lovesky films, and Stephen Ray, who had been in The Crying Game and Diary of the Vampire and all that. And the film, there was a bit of everything in there. And that, of course, that doesn't work. So the Europe sort of like tried to compete with Hollywood, and they made horrible films.
Well, I wouldn't say that there, because I tend to have a high regard for European and British productions. Well, British productions, that's a little bit of a story, but yeah, I can see what you mean there. I know, France tried to do a lot of sort of Hollywood type of productions, through Europacorp, which is Luc Besson's company, with Valérian et des planètes du cité. Sorry, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, or La Femme Nikita, Léon, Les Professionnels. And then it went bankrupt because they couldn't compete just recently. So, too bad on Besson. Désolé si vous entendu. Sorry, my French sometimes slips up a little bit here and there. But I will say, you were saying about the mistranslation of the humor. American and British audiences, you noted, could that mistranslation have been a result of the dark humor or lack of a stereotypical villain in Drop Dead Fred? Because you mentioned that on a Telegraph interview you did a few years ago.
That's a very good question. I'm not sure if I have a good answer to it, because Drop Dead Fred basically doesn't have a good villain, because Fred is the villain, and at the same time he is the hero. But for the audience, he's the one who basically makes havoc, and therefore he has to be the villain. But you feel from the beginning that he's actually there to help her. So it's a very weird kind of a of a villain. The mother is probably the biggest villain in reality, because she ruined Lizzie's life when she was a child. But structurally, she's not there enough to be a big villain. So it is, in that sense, it's a weird film, and I don't know how we got away with it, but it sort of worked out. I think people sort of think that the villain is actually the difficult time she has to lead her own life. It's almost like an invisible villain.
I would agree with that there. The issue of, her imaginary friend and also issues that she has with her mother. It's a fairly complex sort of concept to get your head around when you're 6, 7, or 8 years old. But when you get older and you look at these issues in hindsight, you could definitely relate to that. I know from my experience, and that's not an easy thing to say. My family divorced. My father was not the sharpest brain at all. So, there are family issues that go about here and there. This is the first time I'm actually saying this on my YouTube channel, so that's quite a start. But I think this is a good sort of tool for just particularly mothers and daughters. I don't have any sisters that can talk about family issues and emotional support, because there's some sort of that passive-aggressive element coming out from even both of the characters.
Yeah.
I think that lends itself a bit more of a maturity element that you otherwise would not see in films that are like this. Because in Australia, it's given a PG. Family films, more or less. I think that is the great charm of it. Villain-wise, there isn't one. I'm just going to rule that out. I know everyone likes to say, it's the mother, but I'll say it's up to your own interpretation. Because it's an inner demon that we have in all of us, that little side of us, the devil and the angel on our back. That's kind of what Fred is on a sort of metaphorical standpoint.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the discussions about mental illness and disorders definitely do bring it into light in a way that's quite funny. So, yeah, I'm actually very glad that you said that there.
It is, Mark, like there's a dark side to the film that I didn't even really speak about after making the film. I've only started to speak about it recently, in the last, let's say, 5, 6 years or something. There is a hint of at least a psychological incest almost, and that has played in my own youth. I have been the victim of incest when I was very, very young. I never really knew about it until I was like 30, about just before I may drop that Fred. So I filtered it into the movie, but in an extremely hidden way. So it's never talked about. It is not visualized. But when, for instance, Elizabeth in the dream sequence goes to the bed and she sees young Lizzie, who's like 4 or 5 years old, in bed and unties her, that is a very strong reference to the freedom that she gains of her youth. And that has to do with the whole incest thing and everything. It is not a trauma for me anymore, so I can speak about it. I can't say I can speak about it easily. It's never easy. But I have no shame anymore, of course. And I do think that an audience, a part of the audience, feels that underlying theme. And therefore, it's one of the reasons why the film doesn't age that much, because that is something that still happens. It goes to, it doesn't matter what class people come from, it doesn't matter what background they have, no matter how rich they are. That is an enormous social issue that lives in society. And I think that's the fact that that's in there makes that the film has staying power. Anyway, that's what I said. That's what I tell myself. But I said to you, never trust the director.
Well, I actually was even going to say, before behind the camera, maybe that topic might not be too sensitive to discuss, because when I first saw DDF, I did not pick up on a sort of implication of sexual assault.
No, I don't think you don't need to. You don't need to. Absolutely, but there is something there that you feel that it goes deeper than just crazy fun.
Oh yeah, so of course there, but you get through the deep layers of the onion and you see, something is rotten to the core. It certainly opens my eyes to a new interpretation of the film, Yeah, that is a. Oh no! Now I won't be able to see the film the same way again. But it is definitely powerful imagery there. I
Yeah,
know
but
that one scene. You know,
you have to see it
like
more
you
as
said.
you have to see it more as psychological abuse than physical abuse, because the physical abuse that did happen to me, but the physical abuse is not indicated. There is an indication of psychological abuse.
So yeah, I would definitely agree with the psychological element, even if it's not that scene at the end where she comes into terms with becoming a proper woman
Yeah,
without an imaginary friend.
yeah.
You know, she
But
kisses Fred on the cheek and then he disappears into
yeah, I mean, to
sparkles.
become an adult, you have to let go of a lot of things of your childhood. You have to lose your best friend. You have to lose, in certain way, you have to lose yourself in order to be free to become an adult. And that is what the scene symbolizes. She lets go of herself as a child, and because she lets go of herself as a child, she has to let go of Fred also. She can never
That,
be an adult as long as she sticks to Fred.
that's how I interpreted it as well. I know I have that moment in situation where I can't be playing video games and stuff anymore. So I interpret it on a slightly different level, but
Yeah,
I interpret it the same way that you're in your mid to late 20s, early 30s. It's time to move on. You can't be an adolescent in your mind anymore, or
yeah.
whatever it might be. And I think that's definitely the emotional part. I've seen comments on YouTube with people saying that that scene made them cry. Not for me, but I can see why some people said that. I
Yeah,
think that's quite a powerful tool. The only films I can remember that made me tear up were Edward Scissorhands, Toy Story,
yeah.
and oddly enough, even the Aladdin, the Disney Aladdin movie. I won't go into detail about that. That's a bit, that's a side. What about for you? What film made you tear up? Was it your own or?
I'm a complete sentimental, but it's mostly when I'm alone. I have to admit, which of course says a lot about. But I can easily cry about a lot of things when I see them on TV or in the theater. The theater even easier, and not necessarily good films. It is things that touch me. It is like if somebody, for instance, like self-sacrifices himself to help somebody else. That always touches me. And if it's done well, I'll tear up easily. If I'm with somebody, I probably try to keep an appearance a little bit. But it is easy to touch me. For instance, like I remember that I saw The Champ with John Voight, and there's an older version of. But that is like a film that immediately I cry. But it's just an example because there's so many of them. I'll cry at the end of Easy Rider when they're shot of their motorbikes. It's very easy to make me cry.
I know. Well, I probably shouldn't say this. She might kick my ass for it, but my mother, she tears up watching Singing in the Rain or Gigi, one of those old films. And I always sort of, laugh behind the back because I know she's watching one of her films she used to watch as a child. I'm like, even for that matter, on my end, yeah, I'm getting a little bit off topic myself. Let me reel it back in a little bit. I know we were talking a little bit also on the side through the email about Public Image Limited, which is Johnny Lydon's little side group they did after the Sex Pistols. I noticed a really strong influence between Fred's character and that music video that Johnny Rotten was in for
Yeah,
Public Image Limited called Disappointing. He even dresses the same way as Fred. I
yeah.
thought, was that coincidental?
Not entirely, not entirely. I was aware of the Sex Pistols, but I wasn't very strongly aware of them. I wasn't following them or something. But Rick definitely knew him, and he liked the anarchistic side. And the producer, Paul Webster, knew the Sex Pistols very much. And they actually moved, for instance, the wardrobe into that direction. They definitely did. So there was definitely a link. But the link came out from Rik and Paul Webster, and of course helped by the costume designer, because the costume designer also said he has to wear something that looks like vomit, you know, yellow and green, and
Okay.
so they definitely thought about those elements, absolutely.
Well, I definitely got my answer made. This was a long issue because I'm actually a fan of Public Image Limited. I used to hear a lot on the tapes with my father when we would drive down to Cornwall and Devon on holiday. And when I saw that music video on VH1 Classic, I definitely picked up on that link. It was sort of unintentional, but yeah, it definitely makes me like the film even more. And I know you're probably having to get to your dinner soon, so I'll actually give you the last question for tonight, which will be in regards to the animation on the opening credits. That was definitely one of my favorite scenes growing up as a child because it definitely highlights the contrast between Elizabeth's sort of wild spirit about herself and, you know, when she grows up with the little monkey toy's head cut off and then the pirate. It says directed by Arthur Jong, and I thought, when I hope this is not rude. When I thought you saw your name, I thought it meant ate the young. Like, I'm gonna eat babies.
Yeah. Like I'm a cannibal.
Yeah, I thought that was a sort of dark humor, devilish aspect about it.
Yeah.
But you know anything about the animation there? That was.
Yeah, I stupidly enough, when I knew you were going to ask about it, and I had promised myself to look up who did it because he's on the credits, and I didn't. I didn't do it. So I forgot his name, but I do know that he was a man who actually had a almost like a scientific background. He was working for a university in San Francisco, but somebody knew him, and people knew he was very. He made all these drawings, very childlike, funny drawings. So, and we wanted to have that like childlike behavior, attitude in the beginning. And his original drawings were even more beautiful. Animator do all the stuff. So the animator reproduced the drawing and then animated them as a childish piece, just to have fun with them.
That's what I got there too.
It was definitely to set the tone and to set a tone of a sort of like everything that is over the top is possible in the film. And that was set in the tone of the credit sequence with the animation.
That's why we got there too. It was just so energetic and wild the way it was done. It definitely fits the entire mood of the film itself. I don't think that can be replicated. I know, you know, one could say on the other flip side, just like the opening credits for Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman film 7, directed by David Fincher, sets the tone for the film is, which is just really dark, disturbing sort of shadow. It's sort of scratchy, industrial sort of music.
Yeah.
I'll definitely take a note of that when I get into my sort of film career and such. Because not only do I do documentaries on my YouTube channel, I also write scripts. And I do music, soundtrack, and for my own personal end. If you are definitely making a new project, maybe it might take some time, maybe it won't. Definitely give me a holler. I do mostly electronic stuff, and I do sort of like the quirky, but you know, I have a way about it with sort of brass and horns, like we're on the Drop Dead Fred theme song in the beginning, in the credits. So yeah, so it's been very nice talking to you. I'm just gonna stop the recording on this in a few moments, but it's been very nice talking to you, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you're also safe with the floods that are going on in Benelux and Germany. Have you been affecting your area?
So weird, Mark. It is. Holland is a small country. You know, from top to bottom, it's probably 400 miles or something. And that province where this happens is like 200 miles away. But 200 miles is nothing for America. But here it's an enormous distance. So we weirdly enough, in Amsterdam, we have no issue with it whatsoever. It is a very local problem. But it is quite something, because it's almost the kind of flood disaster that you don't expect in a country like Holland. You just don't believe that will happen. But the only good thing, and it is not because it's horrible for the people, the only good thing is that we learn that nature is still stronger. And we are ruining nature. You know, nature is just doing what it does. You know, there has no will, it has no purpose. It's just doing what it does. And it's a great thing for us to notice that you know, we can try to limit it and change it and whatever. But if we do the wrong things, nature will do whatever it does.
It will bite back with teeth.
Yeah.
In many ways, just like Fred, the imaginary character,
Yeah.
will bite back with teeth there. I just wanted to say that for the audience out there, just because I like to lend my support to my European brothers and
Yeah.
sisters, even if, you know, Britain cut our ties. We're not European anymore, so to speak,
Not anymore,
except
no.
for when it comes to football.
Yeah. But they lost. They lost the finals.
They did there. I knew Italy would win one way or another.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I was not expecting
I
the
regret
races.
I have two British sons, so I had to be a little bit like chauvinistic and hope that England would win.
Oh yes, you know, I get that there. I see you're lending your Anglo support with those Queen Elizabeth stamps on your shirt.
Yes, absolutely. These are all stamps from Elizabeth.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen one of those in a while, but yeah, very cool there. Yeah,